I'd like to call the meeting to order. The Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners would like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to start with a moment of silence, please. On a roll call, all 5 commissioners are present today. Just like to remind everybody, we'd like for you to sign in so we have a record of your attendance. And I'm going to open up the public comment portion of our meeting. Anyone from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to administrative business. Mr. Lawfrey?
I don't see the clerk on the Veterans Day Parade Committee request. Do you have anything for that?
Just what's in the packet.
Okay, so just that'd be the only thing that we have under administrative business formally, and then okay. Maybe a United Way update.
Okay. Well, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the Veterans Day Parade Committee request.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that?
Just so people know, they've just requested to use the parking lot for parking on the day of the Veterans Day Parade. So
in place of porta potty.
Yeah, in place of porta potty. So for the participants in the parades, that's what the request is.
Okay. Voting?
Aye.
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 On the United Way.
The United Way.
Update, or I can do that. If
you can do that if you'd like.
Just wanted to announce that we had throughout the month of October we were doing a United Way campaign fundraiser through the county, and our goal was $5,000, and we blew the roof off of that. I think we ended up at $6,000 on fundraising from contributions, and then as part of that we had this crazy idea, I think, that one of the commissioners came up with, to do an ice bucket challenge, and there was voting with dollar bills, and there were some last-minute shenanigans, I believe, that happened.
Yes,
so there was the top 3 were going to get the ice buckets, and I was firmly in 7th place with 15 minutes to go, and ended up in 2nd place somehow. I think there was a commissioner involved in that as well.
Yes, but I have to thank whoever it was that pulled off some of the shenanigans, because at the 10 minutes before, Commissioner Shimke and I were on deck to be iced.
Yes.
Weren't 80% of the funds raised made in like the last 5 minutes?
Oh no, probably 95%.
That's what I thought.
I think there was about $600 raised via the ice bucket challenge, and 400 of it came in the last 10 minutes. So
that's what.
Which was rather humorous.
And before that, there was some like an hour before too. But anyways,
but it was a lot of fun.
The top vote getter was the county clerk, Janet Klaczynski, so she will be getting ice bucket.
And I'm going to stand with her in solidarity.
She's first. And then myself.
Tomorrow's supposed to be 17 degrees.
And then
there's our winner.
Yes. The EMS.
We're just trying to figure out what day to do the ice bucket.
No, we're going to do it today at noon, and I'm going to stand shoulder to shoulder with Janet because I got her into this.
The results changed pretty drastically.
Oh, in the last 4 or 5 minutes, it was crazy.
Wow. There wasn't any phone calls from Russia or anything?
No, there may have been some outside involvement, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But then EMS Director Jamie Miller and the Road and Bridge Superintendent Vincent Greer tied for 3rd. So they will also be receiving ice buckets.
A tie.
At noon. It was a tie. It was interesting how that happened.
Some shenanigans
really
too.
More shenanigans.
There were no shenanigans.
More shenanigans.
There was a lot of shenanigans. It's amazing how I could be almost in the last place, and all of a sudden.
Was today at noon?
Yes, today at noon.
It's what's called being a good sport.
I did tell them if our meeting went past noon, I would just have to miss. That's all I had under.
That's leading up to the Veterans Day Parade on our website, because it's quite a list.
I'll check on that.
Okay, because you got something Friday evening, Saturdays, different things, all day Saturday. And Sunday, Monday, like I said, the list is just on and on.
Well, Mr. Chairman, well, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that the Rotary Pancake Breakfast will be
Absolutely.
on Veterans Day at the
Is it
community
on here
center.
too? Yes, it
And
is.
disabled
At,
veterans
at the
have free
riverfront.
pancakes.
Yep. So, anyways, is there any other administrative business? I just had one comment that we had been talking about shoulder drop-offs quite a bit, and in 2017, there was $40,000 in the road and bridge budget for a shoulder machine, and the money got spent somewhere else. There's no shoulder machine ever purchased. Does anybody know where that money went?
You know, I think you brought this up once before, Commissioner, and it was in the budget. It was not purchased. It doesn't mean that the funds were necessarily spent on something else. They could have just rolled over and been cash carryover in the next year if the purchase wasn't made, or reallocated to a purchase of other equipment. But it would have had to been money spent on equipment, and it would have been at the discretion of the Public Works Director at that time on how that was handled.
Okay.
Well, I think people are very concerned about all the accidents that we've been having, and that is something that needs to be researched.
Sounds like we're going to get one.
Shoulder machine?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like. We need one.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, did all the commissioners get the Leavenworth County 4-H Council invite for Saturday night?
Yes.
Anyone attending?
If no one else is
I won't be
going
able
to
to.
attend, I'll attend.
You won't be able to?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I'm out of town.
You out of town? You gonna be
I
able to
don't,
attend?
my schedule, the crystal ball is very foggy still.
Okay, all right. Well, I can make it.
I'll make it.
All right. It's at 6 o'clock at the Tonganoxie Christian Church. Okay. And I will try to be there also. Okay. Any other administrative business this time? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Has the commissioners had a chance to look at everything on the consent agenda?
I make a motion, we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Have a motion, second. Any further discussion on any items on the consent agenda? Voting?
Aye.
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 Aye. We ready for the county appraiser? Bob in here?
I don't see him.
Bob was out in the hall.
He was.
Becky's calling.
Well, I guess while waiting, I guess I have a question for the senior county counselor.
I will endeavor to answer it.
I figured you would. Some of the commissioners have been approached by a group of people that want to talk about an issue that's coming up on planning and zoning. So if these folks meet with one commissioner in their office, and then they come to the next office and meet about the same thing, and then another office, could that be construed as a serial meeting?
If there is any interaction between the commissioners via those persons acting as intermediaries, messengers, however you'd wish to term it, then yes, that would be a classic serial meeting, which is prohibited under the Kansas Open Meetings Act. Due to the fact that the Kansas Open Meeting Act requires that all deliberations and action of this body take place in open session, that when you have individual meetings on a specific topic and that group meets with more than two of you, there is the potential risk of an inadvertent violation of the Kansas Open Meetings Act, and I have to caution each of you to, if you are requested to have such meeting, you are certainly free to do so, and I encourage you to meet with your constituents. At the same time, I would caution you to admonish those individuals that there can be no interaction between yourself and any other commissioner, and that interaction boils down to, well, Commissioner X said Y, or I even believe Commissioner X's position is Y, because in that case, they're inviting your comments on the possible votes of another commissioner, and that constitutes an interactive meeting. So I would just admonish you to exercise caution, much as you did Monday night, which I would like to compliment the board on, particularly Commissioner Shimke.
He did the best.
His behavior was exemplary. And I'm certainly more than happy, and your county clerk is present, and Mr. Lofrey, any questions you have regarding such interactions with your constituents, I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, the Open Meetings Act has certain parameters that you need to stay within, and I do not want to see, and I'm sure you don't either, no one wants to see, an inadvertent violation of the act.
That's why I brought it up. So, if we meet with these folks, and they do come in there and say that, is that something that has to be self-reported to the Attorney General's office?
I would suggest that at that point you
In the meeting.
end that part of the meeting with your constituent, and I'd ask that you consult with me to see if we do need to self-report at that point in time. Interaction does not involve my simple declaration to Commissioner Culbertson, what Commissioner Stephen told me. It's some relay of information back from Commissioner Culbertson to any of the other of you. So if somebody simply were to tell you, well, I believe Commissioner X believes Y, don't comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
You're free to comment on your thoughts. And again, I would also offer this, until such time as the chairman gavels down, which he doesn't, ends the public meeting and ends the discussion, you should not make any declaration of your position on an issue that you serve in a quasi-judicial capacity. It would be no different than if a judge were to announce before the start of a trial what the result's going to be. So please keep that in mind as well.
If the judge would do that, it would save a lot of attorney fees.
And that's why it's prohibited.
That's why it's prohibited. All right, well, thank you. I think you answered my question. Mr. Weber, how are you today?
All right. We just have two disaster release, both from the tornado. One house was torn down, the other one we did have some estimates on, and they both passed. They were destroyed, substantially destroyed by the tornado on May 28th. I'd like to pass a resolution granting tax relief prorated for both of those houses.
Commissioner, have any questions?
Nope.
No, I was just going to ask Bob if we've made any progress. Seems like we've brought up a number of times, and I don't know if there's necessarily anything actionable with this board, but it seems like there's been a lot of consensus in there's clearly taxes assessed on properties beyond just on buildings, assets beyond just the home, and kind of what, if anything, we can or should be doing to help kind of push that agenda.
You talking about the outbuilding?
Yeah, I mean, that's the most obvious one we've talked about.
I mean, it would take legislative action. I don't know that there's anything going on out there. We'd have to contact our legislatures. I don't think the Appraisers Association is behind this at all. In the past, it's always been you don't prorate on and you don't prorate off. They did make this, they wanted to make some relief available to homeowners for disaster relief. I mean, this is just the history of it. So if something, if that has to be changed, we would have to contact our legislatures and see if somebody could draw up a bill to get that changed.
But that would have to be a statewide policy. There's nothing an individual county can do.
And to clarify, maybe just clarify what homestead means in the statute. Does that include outbuildings? Does that include agricultural outbuildings classified as agricultural? Does that include? Should we be doing it for commercial properties? Those sorts of things. But it would take some clarification there, and then some change, obviously, because right now, homestead, you can't make that look like it would encompass commercial properties. But should it encompass a residential detached garage? Should it encompass a building classified as agricultural? Because right now, the law looks at agricultural buildings as commercial buildings.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it should be as common as use. Like currently you have something you can use. After an event like this, you have something you can't use.
Like personal property on your car when you sell it, you get a
Heaven
refund.
forbid.
You know, but when you build the building, you don't pay until it's the January after it's there
Sure.
either. You don't prorate them on either. You don't prorate them off. That was always the history behind it.
I just wonder, we've got this event coming up next week in Wichita, and I didn't know if we're proactively doing anything by department or function to say, hey, look, here's 2 or 3 things that continue to come up, and maybe we could get on a list and find out if there's other counties that have some similar pain or support for it, and that's how this stuff starts.
I don't think it becomes an issue until they're having
Then it happens. Yeah.
have a disaster like that.
I got an email from Senator Tom Holland that he has got something he's working on for this.
Okay.
And I do remember when this first came up, and right after the tornado, that Representative Dove said that he had talked to the speaker that they could get this on the agenda the first couple weeks of the session. So maybe that's something we just need to follow up with, make sure they have a.
We are going to have this work session, correct, before the legislature takes session?
I don't know when that is.
December sometime, you think?
The legislative breakfast that you asked about?
We will certainly try to put that together. I have to better get some invitations sent out for that. And
Okay, so we'll just do the legislative breakfast, we won't do a work session on.
no, we'll just do the breakfast, which then opens it up as a
Right.
meeting, but all that can be discussed at that time.
Yeah, but when we get them in here, we can shut the door.
And lock it.
Well, that one. Okay, just so we
That was
have
all,
something.
that was all I had. I just, continuing to keep it top of mind and make sure that
Right.
we continue to let the state know we're displeased with that approach.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Did anybody make a motion?
I'll go ahead. I'll make a motion to approve the disaster relief tax abatement for homes substantially destroyed by the May 28 tornado, tax IDs 1-27185 in the amount of $22,482, and tax ID 1-32378 in the amount of $4,031.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Then we'll have to have a motion for the board order 2019.
Yep, that was it.
-7. Someone will make that motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on board order 2019-7. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Bob. Okay, we're ready for the mental health task force ballot request.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. I think you have my comments that I prepared for you this morning, which provide the details of the task force's fine-tuning of our proposal for expansion of mental health services in Leavenworth County. This is Kim Knight, who is the assistant principal at the high school and also the mental health liaison at the high school, and Mike Griswold, who is Leavenworth City Commissioner, but also the facilitator and author of our initial report and PowerPoint presentations. And he wasn't able to be here the first time we presented. I just wanted to give him some kudos and credit for the hard work that he did putting this together with his own time, energy, effort, and in some cases even expense. So thanks, Mike, for doing that.
Yeah, the board would like to thank you also and thank Kim for everything she's done.
Thank you.
And the other
It
members.
doesn't go unnoticed.
There's other members of the task force present today.
Yes. Yeah, I want to thank everybody that served on this task force. I mean, when it started, of course, we all wanted it up and going before the legislative session in 18, but that just wasn't possible. But that was the intent. It just takes time to get everything organized.
So also in the audience are representatives of the school districts in the county, and I just wanted to acknowledge that they are here as well, in addition to the task force members, because this obviously impacts each and every school district in our county, all 5 of them, and so they may be able to answer questions if you have them as we go through this presentation. I'll avoid reading it to you because I know that you can read, but I'll comment on each paragraph or section as we go through this. So we did fine-tune our proposal, starting with looking at putting a therapist in every school in the district. Now, that's not one therapist for every school, but that is a therapist available to every school in the district. And the numbers originally did not include any kind of subsidy from third-party payers like Medicaid, TRICARE, et cetera, but we have adopted the state's plan for school-based mental health. And obviously, we started that in Leavenworth and reported that to you last time. And that process involves KDHE allocating money to the school districts, who then sign a memorandum of agreement with the community mental health center in their area for the hiring, supervision, and oversight of the actual clinical work that happens in the school. That process involves the state paying 25% of the mental health liaison, or I'm sorry, 75% of the mental health liaison cost in the school. The school's picking up 25% of that cost, and then the grant paying 25% of the mental health center's clinician time, efforts, et cetera, with the rest picked up by third-party reimbursement. So what you see before you today is the reduction in that amount for school-based therapy is based on what we anticipate being able to collect in third-party reimbursement. Because the number came down, our original proposal suggested that we would implement high school, middle school first, grade school second, but since the number has come down and we do feel that there's an urgency to implement this in all schools as quickly as we can, just a crying need, literally a crying need for these services in our schools, to implement them all in the first year, which will be a hefty undertaking by all of us, but again, the school districts have skin in the game, as does the state, and then potentially our local citizens. So that's the first section that saw a significant reduction. The other piece is staff compensation. We continue to suffer staff losses as a result of our salary schedule at the Guidance Center and all mental health centers in Kansas. There are some federal initiatives both in Missouri and Oklahoma that are stealing clinicians from Kansas, making $10,000 and $15,000 more than the mental health providers in Kansas. That's called the CCBHC, or Certified Behavioral Health Care Centers. It's a federal program. Kansas had the opportunity to participate some years ago, but our governor and commissioner of KDADS at the time chose not to put us into the running for that. So we're hopeful that that will happen in the future, but until it does, we'll continue to struggle to recruit and retain highly qualified professionals.
Can I ask you a question about that? When you're giving that staff compensation, are you spreading that equally across your staff, or how do you anticipate that being done, and what percentage of an increase would it be?
That would be a 5% increase to all staff except myself.
You're not giving yourself an increase? All right.
I'm not going to campaign for something that potentially enriches me or creates criticism for that, and I'm compensated.
But so the amount is 5%?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yes. The other major change really involves the crisis stabilization program. As we've reported, our police department, sheriff department, both are engaging a lot of mentally ill people that either end up on the street or in jail or even later prison. Across the state, there are crisis stabilization programs that are springing up that are funded with state SGF, state funds. And the most recent one was opened this week in Manhattan, and I toured that facility. They have a space for 12 beds. It's really run as an outpatient program, not as an inpatient program. And the state has allocated $700,000 for that program. There's some additional third-party reimbursable possibilities within that service system, but once again, it begins to relieve the pressure on law enforcement and the sheriff's office as they take clients there for crisis resolution. Those crisis resolutions used to happen at the state hospital. They no longer happen at the state hospital. We need to have a community space to provide that service. We initially thought about expanding, maybe making kind of creating space in our current building for a couple of beds, but if we spend $100,000, $150,000 and then get a crisis stabilization center, that money has not been well spent. So we're suggesting that we eliminate that, go full bore with trying to encourage KDADs to make Leavenworth, Northeast Kansas, the next space where they provide a crisis stabilization center. And I would anticipate, again, I don't know what the operating budget would be, but we're about the same size as Manhattan, not in geography, but population. We would also expand then to the 4 counties north of us to make this same crisis stabilization unit available to them, both for the geographical reach as well as the volume that we would be able to or need to keep this unit open and operational. I don't know it's possible that Leavenworth and our 3 counties could keep it filled, but nonetheless, I've been encouraged by state people to make this a broader geographical reach for our crisis stabilization unit. And I think that if we have skin in the game with the state, that the likelihood of us winning that goes up. And that's why I'm suggesting $150,000 to support that crisis stabilization center. We've had some conversations in the community about where that could be, and I don't want to say, I guess it's too early really to talk about that, but there's some realistic possibilities that we wouldn't have to remodel any space. There is space perhaps in the community that we could just kind of turnkey ready or mostly turnkey ready for an operation like that. But those dollars stay in this current proposal.
Keith,
yes.
On that, how many beds or how many residents are in, would that be?
We're going to project 10 to 12 spaces for that. Right. And it would include sobering beds for those that are just intoxicated. Once they're not intoxicated, we can make a better assessment about what their needs are. Also, just helping people, being able to engage people on a longer-term basis to help them gain access to whatever benefits they have available to them, encouraging them to get and to stay on medication. We'll have medication consultation at the Crisis Stabilization Center to get people on medicine, because we know that for some people, that's what's crucial for them staying and getting better and not creating disturbances in the community.
And what percentage of that 150,000? What percentage of the total cost of that would the county be meeting?
Well, again, I think if we can encourage the state to give us $700,000, then that would be an $850,000 operations for that unit, and we just have to make it work. And I'm fairly confident we can do that based on the budgets I've reviewed of the other crisis stabilization units across the state.
Keith, how many are there, and is there already a pretty substantial list, or a waiting list for those that have applied but have not been awarded?
Well, there's one in Manhattan, there's one in Salina, there's one in Topeka, there's one in Wyandotte County, and there's one in Sedgwick County. So those are the ones that are presently operational. And I've had conversation with the Secretary of KDAD's, Laura Howard, about this, as well as Andy Brown, who's the Director of Mental Health, and said we want to start having these conversations, put us on the list of being the next. And the state is highly motivated to do this. They see this as a way of not building new hospital beds, of creating really the alternative to that. And she said this is a good time. This was just last Wednesday. She said last Monday. She said this is a good time for us to start having these conversations, quote unquote. So I'm reasonably optimistic that we get on the agenda. I'm working through our association to bring influence to that process as well.
And what are the other counties doing? They doing programs similar like this about approaching commissioners and putting it on the ballot?
So So Atchison is the only county that I know about, and that they have interest in expanding mental health services there as well. Those conversations have happened through Atchison Hospital, and I'm on a task force there working toward the same kinds of things. They're really early stage conversations about that. I've talked with the executive director of Kansas Mental Health Center to the north. He has four counties to the north, and they very much would like to support this endeavor. I think, of course, they'd like to have it in their county as well, but having it in Leavenworth County would be reasonable. And so,
Is Brown County one of the four?
yes, it is.
Okay.
So I don't know that we're going to be able to influence them to put skin in the game in this project, but if it's 90% funded by the state anyway, and they're already making concessions by bringing them here, it helps to keep our unit alive and vibrant for our local citizens.
Well, it seemed like, I mean, by location and just population, we would be the next logical,
Yes.
based on everyone that's larger already having the resource.
Absolutely. The last piece then is just to continue to provide the $80,000 to the Sheriff's Department for the therapy that's happening in the jail. Just as a reminder, we initially partnered with the sheriff through a burn grant to put that clinician there. He has struggled to find that in his budget each year since that grant ended, and it only lasted 1 year. But we definitely feel like that's essential. The conference that I went to last Monday, the governor was present. We were really talking about the decarceration of the mentally ill, and this is a big part of trying to create that for our community, putting people who have serious mental illness in the community, keeping them here without keeping them in jail. I also failed to mention that we want to also embed a crisis case manager into the homeless shelter. We believe that having them there full-time to develop relationships with those people will help to encourage them to utilize services, because even though someone might have services available, they may not be using them, and that is a problem. But developing a trusting relationship with a case manager there, we believe, would be helpful, again, to catch these people before they have a crisis, before they find themselves incarcerated.
Keith, I may have asked this before, but are there any studies out there or anything that might help just demonstrate that if you take this more proactive approach rather than reactive, meaning, being upfront in these investments, the savings that one might potentially, that would occur on the sheriff's department, for example, or just safety in general, which is always a concern, but, it's almost like a reallocation in my mind to some degree.
I think I have said before in various settings that we're already spending too much money on what we're doing now, and we're spending it in the wrong places. And this is a realignment of that. Is there an opportunity down the road to defray costs? Can I see fewer people going to jail? Absolutely. Is there a cost associated with that? Absolutely. I don't know that it would reduce the number of police officers that we have on the street.
Right.
I doubt that, but I think that we can perhaps lower the cost of incarceration. We certainly will begin to reduce the amount of write-off that emergency rooms have in dealing with these people who have no insurance at all. And they're highly motivated to see that a crisis stabilization unit is created here. I say highly motivated. I don't know if they're motivated by their pocketbooks, but we haven't asked them either. So that's a possibility. But yes, I think I did give a report, a national report, the cost of mental illness in the U.S. This was a March 2018 report that I sent to our team, and I can send it to the commission as well. I'll do that. So.
Yeah, thank you. I can see it.
I had a couple questions for you. Is the mental health community cognizant of the? I've been contacted by several constituents that are concerned that we're putting the clinicians in the schools, and that's good that we deal with mental health, but there's concern that, and I wonder if the mental health community is concerned about this as well, about the over-medication of students in the schools. Is that something that the mental health community is worried about?
I can speak to, just because we have a clinician right now and kind of what that's looking like. We're really not, the clinician that we have is not what we would refer to as like a med management or somebody that's going to write prescriptions. She's there for a cognitive-based therapy. The whole purpose is for her to be able to respond to kids in crisis and to help with ongoing therapy and stuff like that. In all honesty, it's actually a bigger attempt to prevent medication, to help them kind of work through what they're going through, be able to have somebody that's trained that can talk them through that kind of stuff and
it's more
work
counseling
towards. Yes,
type
it's
of approach.
very counseling. I mean, that's exactly what it is. In our students that she's seen, we have some students that have been referred on for medication. A couple maybe like ADHD type, a couple of depression based, but the vast majority that she's seen have been just simply to do counseling.
Well, I've had a couple
counseling.
people comment on the fact that it seems like in our schools now that especially we're medicating boys, specific
Yeah,
boys.
there is an increase,
And-
especially at the younger ages.
Right, and that is in response to the fact they are boys.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of, we're treating them for something that is a natural condition.
Yep.
And I just wonder if the mental health community is cognizant of that, or if that's something that's on their radar screen.
Well, certainly, our doctor, Dr. William Warrens, is a child psychiatrist, and I can say that he is very conservative in his approach to medication, and it's always as a last resort. He's also trained in parent-child interaction training, and so he wants to make certain that he's doing all he can to help parents manage behavior. But if he's prescribing, or one of his APRNs is prescribing medication to young children, it's because they simply cannot learn unless they're on medication. And that's our approach here locally anyway. And I'm speaking first, I know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not conjecture. But we're very conservative in prescribing medication for youth.
Kim, your licensed clinician, was that the one through the grant?
Yes.
And she's
that
here.
She's here.
Right? Ruby
Yep.
Gradlin. Ruby has been in the position now since August. He's been a great find for us.
And I can tell you just basically a quick snapshot of having her in our building over the past about 6 to 8 weeks. She's seen over 60 of our students at LHS that were either in crisis or were referred by a staff member. We have 45 signed releases for continued services with her, of her being able to check in with kids, do ongoing therapy, maybe refer to case management, that kind of stuff. We have, she's also had referrals or completed 18 intakes is how we refer to it. That's the technical term, but basically what it means is we've had 18 kids who have completely gone through the process of being diagnosed with a mental illness of some kind and creating a treatment plan for that student to become successful. So that's just in about 6 weeks, we have 18 kids who are now on the path to much better health and success in school.
And is that a year-to-year grant?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you getting that grant.
Yeah.
Of the kids that are involved in that, how many would you say alcohol and drugs are related?
Ruby would be able to speak to that better, but so we go back and forth at schools, but a big
Or contributing factor.
Yeah, I think maybe 15-20% are probably dealing with substance abuse issues. But really what we see is that's a coping mechanism for an underlying mental illness. And so a kid is using whatever it is, whatever drug they're using to help them get through their day, and then it turns into an addiction and makes the problem worse. So we're helping to identify kids that are exhibiting those signs before they're turning to drugs, hopefully. But if they already have turned to drugs, then that's part of the treatment plan that she's working on right now.
Any other questions? More discussion?
So I would say that as a result of our ongoing conversations, fine-tuning the request, we've reduced the current request by $235,900 from our previous request for 21 and 22, $635,900 for the following 3 years. So we are very cognizant of the fact that we know that this creates additional taxpayer expense. But the reward, the payoff, I think, is not measured in dollars and cents. It's really measured in life and the quality thereof. And so I just think this is something that the community needs to have an opportunity to decide. And if they don't decide, we'll still work hard to make things happen here that need to happen for our community residents. But I think that this can save taxpayer money in the future, but I can't give you a dollar figure or how long that will take. I do know that when the state hospital system downsized, created community-based options, there was a realignment of funds, but then the population and the services and the need grew. You build it and they will come is the, I guess, the analogy. So we're asking that the commissioner consider a special election in the spring of 2020 to put this on the ballot question. I understand from speaking with Janet that they would put together the ballot language clearly for the taxpayers. So we're just asking that you consider putting this on a ballot, special ballot, in the spring of 2020. The United Way of Leavenworth has agreed to fund our voter education program, essentially from now until then. Both fund it and as well as provide technical assistance. And I met with Lisa Nevins yesterday to discuss that in more detail. And they're ready. Their board has approved that plan and that expenditure. So they see that as really creating opportunities for people to help themselves. And this is one of the things that we're hopeful that you'll consider. So those are all the comments I had.
If the legislature were to pass Medicaid expansion, would that change any of these numbers?
It possibly could improve the amount of third-party reimbursement that we would receive for the school-based work. I don't know that it would impact anything else necessarily, but it could reduce that.
Okay.
Keith, this has obviously been a group that's been very vocal in support and commending all the hard work that you, the staff, everybody does, and I think we've been very vocal in that. Hey, we'd love for our constituents to help make the decision. I think some of the concern I've received, I don't know if some of the others have, is a special election versus next fall, and I know the answer is, when do you need funding? Yesterday.
Yes.
It's always yesterday, and I realize delaying it, even if it is 6, 7, or 8 months, there's some associated cost. But I think the question is, having a special election, one, there's a cost to us to have one versus adding it to the already scheduled fall election. And then two, knowing even just the election that occurred yesterday, how few people sometimes will get out and actually vote. So the concern would be, are you getting a true representation of the will of the people, if you will, when you're taking such a small sample size versus the likely turnout we'd have next fall as far as...
I think the clerk would be a good person to answer that question.
My understanding was that as a special election, this would be a mail-in ballot, and the voter response is higher on a mail-in ballot than it is a primary or general election.
I don't think that'd be true in a presidential election.
Generally speaking, I'm unimpressed with all results, Keith, so I have to defer to, as far as participation goes relative to population.
Right.
But this would be a presidential election, the fall we're talking about.
Well, would it have to be the fall election, or could it be the August primary election?
Then you're going to have to create, but there's going to be an expense there because you have to create ballots then for the independent voters. Because they have to have it, and the unaffiliated, and all of the different.
It would be like postage for the whole county. And also, if this was on the August primary election, when does the budget have to be turned into the state?
Well, as you have said, there are 3 options next year. A mail ballot, the August primary, or the November general. If the board did decide to do the August primary election, there would be the additional cost because we would have to develop a question-only ballot for the unaffiliated voters. But at that time, what my thought would be, if we had the August election, I would prepare 2 budgets. I would prepare a budget without the initiative of mental health on it and one with. And depending upon the vote, then we would publish the budget that accordingly went with the results of that election.
So we could get it in time for the budget year if we did it in August?
I believe we could. It would be a matter of, you know, developing 2 budgets, but, you know, the difference would be the funding that would be allotted through the election.
In
Could
August.
you give us what you think the cost of a mail ballot as opposed to having you prepare it like in August or in the general election?
I did go back and review the 2015 countywide election that we had. And I had seen some astronomical figures put out there that I knew were not true. And so I did go back and research, and we did that mail ballot election in 2015 countywide for a little more than $32,000.
And that was on the sales tax?
That was on the sales tax. We did have
We
close
spent
to a
more than that on the
50%
interest of the money we
turnout
didn't use.
on that election. I do estimate, you know, and maybe it's a high estimate, but I do estimate probably $50,000 to do this mail ballot. One reason being the cost of postage has increased. The other being that next year we will have a lot of additional registrations come through on voter participation, you know, because it being a presidential election. I don't think I'm overestimating tremendously when I say the 50,000. But I do look at, you know, Chad brought up a good point about the percentage. You know, yesterday we had a 15% turnout. But the last 2 mail ballots that we had in USD 464 and USD 458 were tremendous. 464 had, you know what, over a 60% turnout, which is remarkable. 458 had over a 50% turnout. So I do feel that the mail ballot does give an opportunity for everyone. Now, you know, that's my thought. I look at 464, which was the last one, which was a very close election. So I do feel that both a yes vote and a no vote were very much promoted. I do think it was a very fair election. So the additional cost, if we were to do it in August, I don't know, $6,000, $8,000 because of additional ballot stock, you know, some publications.
I have a question, you know, just with looking at having to do, if you did an August ballot, which is that traditionally the independents and other parties, libertarian, they don't get to vote in the primary. And so how do we get people understanding that they can that they can vote when traditionally they have not been allowed to?
And I think that would be a problem. I really do. I feel that you're exactly right. When we look at an August primary, the Democrats and the Republicans both come out a lot more than the unaffiliated voter. So the campaigning done, you know, whatever initiatives are put out there, we would have to press for that. I will say that in that August primary, we may see a 35 or 40% turnout. I mean, I think we'd be lucky to probably see a 40% turnout. Now, of course, if there is a push for this initiative, it may go up some. But generally, in an August primary, even during a presidential year, that turnout does not exceed, you know, 40, 42%. I also realize that, you know, when I talk about a mail ballot election and I talk about percentages, that we have seen in the last 2 school bond elections, it may not be that high countywide. Because, you know, there are different areas of the county that have a higher participation of voters than other areas. So I can't guarantee you that a mail ballot election countywide is going to generate a 60% turnout. You know, I can't do that. But I know historically the turnout for a mail ballot election has been greater. November, of course, we are going to see a high turnout. I see there would be no additional cost, and so of course that would be a pro to putting that question on there. But I also have looked at other questions that have been put on November ballot elections. There is so much campaigning done for this upcoming November presidential year that will that question be lost in the scope of the ballot? So no matter when you have it, there will have to be a tremendous push for or against, you know, whatever the outcome is, to make people aware that that question is on the ballot.
So but if in November, sorry, it would miss the 2020
budget.
Absolutely.
Calendar year.
There would be no way that we would be able to budget for that if you wait until November of 2020. That would then be, you know, an entire year later.
Can't get a loan?
Please?
Can't get a loan in November?
No, I don't
If
think
it
you can
passed?
get a loan.
Right after. Say it did pass.
No.
Totally serious. Say it did pass.
No, I don't believe that, well.
No bond or anything we can, if it did pass in November.
Or put it as a quarter cent
You know,
sales tax.
if it doesn't pass though, you know,
Borrow.
the whole point of the board deciding to put it out to the question is to give the voters, give the people of Leavenworth County the opportunity to make the decision themselves.
Well, you know, in March, that's when they send them little green envelopes out and tell you how much your property values have increased. That might deter some people too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have worked with the committee some, and we did decide on a time to have that election. We did move it from March to, I think, the 23rd of April, something, the 23rd of April.
Well, I know after them green envelopes came out, our phones blew up.
So,
We had from 4% to 23%, I think, with an 8-point.
Remember, that wasn't an actual bill.
That wasn't.
No, it was to soften the blow when you get the actual bill.
well, this last budget cycle, we went from 197,000 for the guidance center up to, was it?
289.
Exactly, was it 280?
289.
Or, I don't remember the exact amount.
289.
289, I was close. But if you look at that in terms of spending $50,000 on postage, that's a big chunk of what we increased our budget for mental health next fiscal year. So I personally don't see any justification. I'd rather put the $50,000 into your organization than to spend it on postage. And I do think it would behoove the United Way, or, you know, you would have to work to get the turnout in August, but I don't think that's insurmountable at all. I mean, I think it's if you could, because I think that August primary, you may have, there's a couple other issues that may be coming down the pike that may end up on that August primary ballot.
You know, I certainly cannot predict, as you mentioned, the crystal ball. I cannot predict what turnout's going to be. I can just give you the historical turnouts that we have seen. I'm just trying to put all the options out there.
Sure.
There are those 3 options, and
Janet, what is the deadlines for the August primary and/or the November election as far as putting something on the ballot? When would that have to be proposed, voted, and
You
approved on.
would, filing deadline is June 1st. And so I would have to know, of course, by June 1st. But I do believe that if the board decides to go for that August primary, the sooner
Right.
that people can know, the better.
And what's the November?
November, right after the primary election.
Okay, so sometime in
Second week
August.
of August.
Okay.
You know.
Well, the August, we'd know, or June, you'd know what the legislature's decided on funding too. And would know about Medicaid expansion.
You can direct me to put a question on the ballot. You know, there is a period of time that we can withdraw that question if something were to happen. But
So if today, if we voted to direct you to take those steps, clear up until June, to that deadline, the board could come back and say.
to withdraw that
We're-
question.
And we'd work, obviously with you guys, if you wanted us to withdraw it or not.
The
I'm
only
not
way
sure
you
that-
withdraw it if the legislature gave all kinds of money, is that what you're saying? It's not gonna happen.
What I have been
Okay.
told by one person is that if Medicaid expansion occurs, that expansion of the school pilots will not expand, and because they're not going to spend both money. But however, the Senate's plan for expansion is to have the MCOs and the hospitals cover the state share of expansion in a tax, basically. So they would be taxing the MCOs, insurance companies, as well as hospitals' share of that expansion dollar. There's no work requirements in that. There's no drug testing requirements in the Senate's plan. It's just they'll move forward if these entities will pay the state's SGF portion of that expansion. I think there's a good likelihood that that will pass in the legislature, but we can't predict how many more clients that we will have as a result of that, and will it give us, I guess, community-wide an extra, $1.2 million. It's hard to say. I would just like to.
You write off about $1 million a year now, don't you, Keith?
What's that?
You write off about $1 million a year
Yes,
now, don't you?
we do.
About 10%.
Yeah.
So, Keith, one more question. If we if this passed, this $1,164,000, would it increase your organization's budget, or would it supplement just what you're spending now?
Yeah, this is just a break even.
This is just.
Yeah, this will just expand our budget by these expenditures.
Okay, but would it be meeting the needs of your budget that exists now, or would you actually be increasing your total overall with this?
Well, it increases our total budget. Some of these dollars stay with the schools, though.
But I think what he's asking is, does this replace the $290,000 that you're already receiving?
No, that's for current operations. Yeah, this is new stuff.
That wasn't exactly what I was asking, but that's good. That's a good question.
This is new stuff. So someone asked me, it's actually Mike in an email. If I am to give a 1% raise every year to my staff, I have to find $65,000 new dollars every year to do that. A 1% raise, I have to increase my revenue budget by 1%. And I haven't been able to do that now for 5 years. So it's just in further cost cutting that we're able to balance.
That's not even revenue, it's your profits.
Huh?
It's not even revenue, it's your profits.
Yeah.
So I've been getting a few phone calls on this. Another thing is we've gone from 197 to 80, and then the task force's proposal is 1.2 million. I mean, we're obviously asking the community to reprioritize this to a much higher level.
Yeah. And so, I hate to give away my age, but 29 years I've been in this position, in this seat, and I have never seen this type of overall leadership of the community support for mental health in my tenure here. I mean, it's overwhelming. It's encouraging to see that level of support from the schools, from the hospitals, from law enforcement, from the courts, to have this kind of people saying, we've got a problem, folks. We need to do something about it, and we need to do it quickly. I'm encouraged by that. So, yes, it is more expensive. Is it more expensive than what we're doing now? I don't think so. Is it something that people in our community need? I think that we already demonstrated that through the data and research that we've provided. One of the, whether it's a April election or August election, our task force will go forth and educate as many and often throughout the county. We want widespread turnout for this. We want voters to be knowledgeable about this initiative. One of the concerns I have is the momentum and losing momentum waiting from now until August. I've got volunteer task members now willing to help put this material together, publish it, and then we need to identify who our community speakers are and then get that public speaking circuit going. And if we stretch it out from now till August, I think anytime you have volunteers doing anything, the further you stretch it out, the weaker that effort gets. And I don't want to see a weakened effort as a result of time span. I understand the expense of a special election. If that becomes the detractor from passing it, and people vote no because we had a special election, that would be a concern of mine. But at the same time, Leavenworth County, well, all counties in the Guidance Center District have gotten a great bargain for the last 29 years, in my opinion, on per capita contributions for mental health. The first 27 years of my career here, we got $100,000 a year for 27 years. So everybody's budget grew but ours. And we built a beautiful building and expanded supports. We did that out of creativity, maximizing the Medicaid dime, and local donors. So that's how it was accomplished. I just want to see this happen in my tenure here as the director of the Guidance Center.
Like I said, I'm concerned about the timing about when everybody gets their reappraisals. I think that's going to hurt you. Because like I said, I mean, I know if the rest of the commissioners got as many calls as I got about their appraisals and taxes. But it went on for about a month, I think, until they got to their hearings, I guess, or their protests. And we had some very angry people. So I did anyways.
Is it predicted then that valuation's going to go up again this year?
You know, I should have asked Mr. Weber why he was here.
It's not that. It's this time when it comes, it's not going to say it's not an invoice. It is an invoice.
Oh, yeah, we're getting ready to get one right now, yeah, in November, to tell you to come in here and we want your money now. But, you know, so I don't, did the rest of you get a lot of calls? Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, oh, yeah. A lot. They were angry.
Keith, because it sounds like the spread or the difference between doing a special mail-out ballot versus the primary is $40,000 plus net. I think that'd be pretty tough for. I mean, we'd get a lot of criticism. I mean, in just the last few weeks, I mean, a lot of phone calls and concerns, not necessarily about the initiative or why it needs to happen, just what that additional expense would be. And if we're not risking anything from a budget cycle perspective, and we can estimate, we don't have any crystal balls, we've made that clear on either side of the podium here, but
Mike's got one.
You know, a 40 or 50 or, you know, percent participation rate, whether it be in the primary, whether it be a mail-in. And I get it. When you have momentum, you hate to stop. I do understand that, but that's a pretty big funding piece. If that's all we're doing is trying to continue momentum versus timing, because it's not going to change. If successful, it's not going to change the timing of your budget or when the dollars would be.
Political campaign though, 6 months. I mean, sometimes the longer you have to lay your groundwork is better. So, you know.
Especially if you have a fundraiser like the Alliance did or the Council on Aging does. Have a large turnout for that.
Can I ask whose responsibility would it be to educate the independent voters that they can come out and vote? Like, is that something that the task force is going to have to take on as far as the education piece?
Probably
Or
you'd need to do a mailer or a handout or something, some information.
that's going
I mean, well,
to
it
take
could-
out of our
it could go on
campaign
our
budget as
website.
well.
Well, it could, yeah.
We will certainly advertise that there is a
Right.
question-only ballot out there. That's just, all that is on our website.
Right.
But if you've got the United Way, that's very helpful. That's good that they're on board.
Well,
And I know Vicky's been really on board on this, and
Well, and at the risk of
commend
additional scrutiny on social media, I think that one of the things, as I hear of the expenditure by the Board of County Commissioners on paying for, and although I really do appreciate Commissioner Smith's point about the timing being everything, but I think that when we say that's a lot of money, this is a human issue. This is an issue of people being able to look at and vote and consider something that is about human beings. We don't bat an eye when we say we want to pay $50,000 to do a study on a road or a bridge, or, whether or not, well, like with Commissioner Culbertson's thing for the
152 bridge.
the bridge. And it's like, don't bat an eye, yep, we're not going to even debate that. But that's an expense that over time could improve our county, correct? I mean,
that's a great point. I think if I could put it on the August ballot and it costs us $0, I'd rather do that as far as Jeff's bridge.
And still get it on the 2020,
Right.
I mean,
But I
2021
get your
budget.
point.
I'm just saying that,
2021 budget.
it's just
And-
something to consider. I mean, so I say that rather than looking at the expense of the ballot, which I know I'm not tax and spending, I'm just saying the expense of the ballot, let's look at what the timing of the ballot. Is it better timed to wait until August? Because I do not support putting it on the November ballot, because I do not support putting out another year and putting
Right.
off another year
Right.
this situation that our county is
It's literally dire.
it's dire.
Yes.
But,
Well, I think we would.
the timing of the August
If it wasn't
war,
going to
but-
impact the budget, I think that would have been.
What if the county,
We'd support that first and foremost, because now we're going to save another $6,000 or $7,000.
what if
But
the
obviously
county
that misses
doesn't
2020.
pay? What if the county doesn't pay the additional cost for a spring election? What if you guys did a fundraiser, and we've got time, if you came up with the money and the county didn't have to pay for it, then we could approve putting it on a spring ballot.
I think that's a valid,
So,
But
so
wait,
the
my
taxpayers,
first phone call would be to the United Way.
Put it on the
because the
August
taxpayers are saying they
they're
just
already
don't want to spend the
helping.
money
But-
on the special election.
But to me, as far as public relations, and I'm not getting in your public relations business, but for you to be raising money to do postage on a special election when you could get this on the ballot in August,
right.
I don't think that's gonna benefit you, public relations wise. Where we can get it on the August ballot and you can use those 50,000 to promote the issue.
That's exactly why I brought that up.
Well, and it is a balance too, though, because again, if it went in April, you're talking about a 4 or 5 month difference as far as the investment or awareness piece goes.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of a reallocation meeting. I don't know what the United Way's budget was for education, or anybody else.
They
for
haven't
that
told me
matter.
either.
Okay.
I don't know. I met with Lisa yesterday, but I don't have any details. But I do know that they have the technical expertise to help us with this. Obviously, we would prefer a spring election, but understanding too the cost, the additional cost being a deterrent to potentially passing this, perhaps we should wait till August. And as long as it, again, can be implemented in 2021, I think that's a reasonable,
That's the key.
a reasonable conclusion.
Because I want to do everything I can do
Absolutely.
to get this mental
And
health.
this is exactly what the tax lid wants. They want it to go to the voters.
But the question is, how important is it to get it on the spring ballot? So what I'm getting from constituents is they don't want the cost of the spring ballot. So the question is, how important is it to get on the spring ballot versus the August ballot? I understand the November ballot is a huge difference because you're gonna miss out the whole year for funding. So I understand that, but if it doesn't cost the taxpayers anything, if they can come up with the money out of their pocket to pay for the spring election, if they feel it's more important for a spring election, I don't think that's unattainable. But if they feel the same way, that wait till the August election doesn't cost you the money, and would the results be any better?
Will any of you face re-election in August?
No.
So we don't have to worry about another vote?
No.
Ballot question? Okay.
We're all 2020. Well, except for Commissioner Culberson. He's going to be the old guy here.
So what would be the logistics, let's say we made a motion to approve this, what, do you draft the language for us that you'd come back with later? We just direct you today to move ahead, or what's the logistics of that?
You would just make a motion today to add a question concerning the mental health initiative for the August election. Later on, we would come back to you with the question, with the explanatory statement, and move on. Really, what you would direct me to do is put a question on the August 2020 ballot, or to hold a special election in April of 2020. At that point, this is all you need to do today.
Janet, how long would they have if we said, if they can come up with the money for the spring election, what date would they have to tell us that before we make that happen?
I understand that, you talk about getting funding through other sources for this election. But if that didn't happen, I think it's kind of a bad point there. I think there's just too much up in the air by us saying, if you get funding, then we'll do it. If you don't get funding, we're not going to do it. I don't think that is a good approach to have towards any election. It's my opinion.
I agree this is unique, but this is a unique situation.
If we were to support the August ballot, but in the meantime, through other funding sources, private, 501c3, whatever it may be, if they decide to go another direction, we could always withdraw it from the August ballot because they're doing a special election in its place.
To hold a spring election.
Up till what date could we?
Well, even going up to January 1st if you wanted to. It's really just a matter of the getting the word out there, no matter when you have the election. So, January 1st.
So if we go ahead and say August, and if you wanted to do that, but my personal view, and is take for what it's worth, it may not be worth anything, but I think you'd be better off spending your $50,000 on educating voters for the August than to, but.
If we did a fundraising campaign, it would probably be a pledge campaign. Once we reach the goal, and ask everybody to make that contribution. Because if it contributes to something that doesn't happen, then we have to give it back. So.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of time. I mean, it's 45 days, give or take, if it's January 1. So.
Yeah, that's just, I think that probably.
Like I said, I'm just concerned that the spring election, after everybody's reappraisals,
I can understand that.
Emotions could play into this pretty hard.
Well, I will prepare 2 budgets, if it is done, for the August election, so that the one we publish by August 25th will be because of the results of the election, whether it is in the spring or August.
So do we need a motion?
Yeah, I guess.
Do you want to make
we
a
have a motion?
I make a motion that the county clerk be directed to draft a question for the August 2020 ballot regarding funding for mental health services.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? This task force was put together December of 17.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith, for that.
That was
18.
Huh?
18.
We were in 18.
18 or something?
Was it 18? It was 2008. Okay, I've lost some track. But anyway, I think they've done a great job in a short period of time and to get the information that needs to be gathered for this. And like I said, I'm so glad that you applied for the grant and got your licensed clinician in your school. Like I said, you just got to continue. And like I said, the only concern with grants is year to year. So it's too bad they don't do multi-year grants on that. But like I said, I appreciate everybody's hard work and what they did. I know folks have donated a lot of time and went way above and beyond to write this. Like I said, I appreciate it. It doesn't go unnoticed on my end, and I just hope everybody else appreciates it. So.
And I appreciate it as well. Thank you all for your participation.
And I want to thank Commissioner Cause for taking this over because I knew nothing about this. I just know we needed to get a task force started to go and get in the right direction. And so once Commissioner Cause came on board, I gladly handed that off to her. So,
if I can say one thing in kind of closing to all of this as well, you know, we had our clinicians start this year, and I gave you guys the numbers of what students they've seen. But I can tell you the very first time that I did this presentation to our Board of Education, we had a student at that exact moment who was sitting on the Blue Bridge and contemplating taking his own life, and he did jump. By divine intervention, somehow he survived that. But the next time I presented this was to the principals of our county high schools. And during that presentation, our principal was removed to find out that one of our students had stepped in front of a train and taken his own life. This year, we had a student who reported something to a teacher about a traumatic incident that had happened previously, and he was really struggling with processing that. Thank God we had processes in place now. When that was revealed, the teacher came to me directly as the mental health liaison, said, I don't know what to do to help this kid. I think he needs to go to our therapist. The very next day, we introduced him to Ruby. By the end of that day, he had revealed he had a full suicide plan and had a conscious effort to take his own life that night. Had the means available. By 6 o'clock that evening, and this was about 3 weeks ago, he was hospitalized for quite a while. Is now back with us. And I will say if we didn't have this process in place, that student probably would not be with us anymore.
Well, if that's not enough to motivate all of the others to apply the same way, I don't know what is. So thank you for sharing.
And Ruby, it's nice meeting you, and thank you for taking the position in our community. So, any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Now the hard work.
There's your reward.
See you tomorrow.
I'll be there.
All right.
And thank you for all the school
thanks for the
district
school
members
personnel
and
taking the
personnel
time out of your
taking,
schedule to be
yes.
here today.
And for our volunteers with the Suicide Prevention Coalition that are here today. And
Really?
Awesome.
It's like in Nebraska.
Yeah, right? I'll have to give Aaron a hard time.
I know it.
Along, right?
Yeah.
Can I hang around till our next meeting? No, well.
I just don't want to get
I'm gonna go home.
Mr. Herring, I didn't notice you back there.
said he was back in the corner. He was hiding. It's because
Like
Mr.
it's napping.
McGaha took his seat.
All right. We'll take a 5-minute recess. We're back in regular session, coming back from recess, so we are ready for Mr. Joseph. Formation of a building codes committee.
Hey, Jeffrey.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Good morning.
The board asked me to form a committee to look into the adopting the building codes within the county. So I followed the administrative procedure outlined in the building codes to select people from 7 professions. And I called several people, and the folks on the list that I provided, they are willing to participate in the committee. So the next step would be if the board decides to go forward, we can form the committee, and then the committee would look at which one of these building codes to choose from. There are like 8 to 10 books, so they'll be going through all that, and then they'll come back with a recommendation to the board. And after that, we have to form a board of code review. And these 7 folks can transition into that board once we get to that point. And then they would look at what's outlined in these individual books and come up with different sections and delete several sections and come up with the actual building code.
First off, I want to say the consensus of the board asked him to do this. I did not ask him to do this. So I just want to make that clear. Right off the bat.
Now, are you going to make it clear to your membership that we were talking about basic codes and not a code like is in existence in Johnson County?
Yes.
And was it the intent of this board that there would be no inspections, you would just be signing that you're building to code? That you'd be stamping your plans and you'd sign that you are building to these codes?
Yes, there'll be different options that they'll be looking at, and then they'll come back to you with several options to choose.
Okay. Looks like you got a good bunch of people and willing to serve on here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about that Chuck guy.
So you just need a motion from us to
Yes,
move ahead?
We need to go forward, yes.
Are you willing to make that motion?
I'll move that we move ahead with the building.
Hold on just a second.
All right. Okay.
So the concept or idea, if we were to approve this group committee, is they will then go through, select a 2006 or 2012 or whatever it is, right? It seems like they do it every couple of years. They update those
And you're
books.
about 6 years behind.
Right, exactly. Or
Actually,
some places are 18 years behind.
Yeah, they'll be looking at the basic stuff, like which of these books that they want to select.
And they're to then exclude all of the things they believe to be irrelevant, say,
Yeah,
in
that's
a
the Board of
county
Code
decision.
Review. That's the Board
Right.
of Code Review's responsibility to go into, dive into each of these books and come up with the basic code.
And then it would then come back before the board to review and potentially adopt.
Yes.
Or make any changes or caveats, because to Jeff's point, I know one thing we were adamant about is we didn't want this to add any cost to anybody. We're not going to employ staff. We're not going to go out and inspect. Like, these are not services that we want to get involved in. But some of us were in support of at least
Basic.
standard of some sort, if nothing else from a fire and safety perspective.
Yes.
Right.
And this would all just apply to the residents? It wouldn't apply to, say, agriculture building?
It'll be primarily residences. That's the primary basic thing we look at. So
And it would be new
construction.
residences.
Right.
New construction.
Or rebuild after a tornado?
Yeah.
Motion.
Any other questions? Then I'll entertain a motion.
But just,
I had one more thing to say.
that did make me think of something, though, that did come up relative to the tornado. So if you had, is there any scenario where if codes, even a very low-level basic code was implemented, and a disaster was to happen, and somebody being quote-unquote, their house was built before these codes existed, is there any downside or risk to the insurance funding or anything after the fact? You know what I mean? Like, they're saying, well, your house wasn't built to code, and there are now codes. Well, the house was built before the code, so I just want to make sure there wouldn't be any downstream impacts that we're not thinking through.
Commissioner Samke, members of the commission, that is a valid point. Perhaps at the time of the adoption of any codes, the board could consider provisions that deal with the case of what I would term an involuntary reconstruction or remodeling of a home, that in the event a residence is destroyed by fire, tornado, or any of the other various reasons, that the building codes could waive them in that case, if you wished to. And term it basically as an involuntary event. But if somebody voluntarily remodels more than 50% of their structure, then the codes could apply. But again, that's
And that's the other
discretionary.
thing we talked about, is it had to be more than 50%.
And that's, again, discretionary on your part.
Any more questions, concerns?
I just wanted to say that I'm in no way for building codes in the county in any way, shape, or form. I think you're going to add costs to people. People live in the county for a reason. We're not taking the choice away from them by not having codes. If they want to buy a house and see if it was built to code, they can hire an inspector. If they want to build it to code, they can hire contractors that will build it to code. We're not saying they can't. If you do this, you're taking the choice away. So I don't agree with that. People live in the county for a reason. So.
Well, there was a downside to some people during the tornado for not having codes.
They could have had it inspected before they bought the house.
Well,
They
this
could
is
hire a
why we're- one
contractor,
reason
they could
we're
hire a
investing.
contractor to build it to code after the fact. We're not saying they can't, but what you're doing is taking the choice away.
But also, I mean, this is I guess, recommendation versus a requirement. If I'm not inspecting and somebody chooses to go a different direction, I can't stop them.
Right.
Say that again.
So if I'm not going to inspect or hold up or add any additional cost at the county level, and they choose to build outside of these low-level standards, I can't stop them. Technically, they're not penalized for doing so. I mean, it's like there's a posted speed limit.
But they might be by
still-
their insurance company in the end if something were to happen when they.
Lawsuit.
If there is code. So,
But that's,
Liability.
but that's just a risk that you take.
But that exists today.
Right.
yeah.
But I think that it's minimal standards, and I think that sometimes we have to make decisions when it comes to safety and well-being, and could I ask Mr. McGaha what he thinks? By any chance, is that appropriate?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's why he makes the big bucks.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Thanks, Commissioners. Commissioner Cos is correct. When I look at it as a public safety aspect, being a responder myself as a firefighter and assisting the community, when you go into a structure thinking that it's sound, if you will, and then get in there and we've had this happen just recently, the entire floor gives away because it was a concrete floor on top of wood truss. The wood truss burned from underneath of it. We could have lost 3 firefighters pretty quick here this time last year. So just simple thought process into people's minds may have prevented that. We were very fortunate that that did not happen, and that's happened more than once, but that's the most recent. Commissioner Stephen, in regards to the disaster side of it, you're correct, is insurance is look at that as your house needs to be built back. You don't get insured for your house being built back up to code because it wasn't a code, and it causes a lot of confusion to that resident when they're trying to rebuild after a disaster or even a fire scenario. So there's pros and cons, when we start looking at any type of building codes. But I think the approach that we're taking is that we have them here, you can look at them, move forward. And we got a lot of work to do with Jeff and the rest of the team when we move forward on this.
Any other questions or concerns? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we form a building codes committee to look into recommendations for recommended building codes for the county.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Thank you. Mr. McGaha should just stay.
You could have
right
just
where
stayed
he
where you
was at.
were. You're next. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning. Yep, still morning.
With the disaster that happened, I just want to kind of brief the commission that still ongoing. There's over 70 counties in the state of Kansas that have been involved in a disaster this year since March. With that said, there's over 600 applicants, and I know in previous meetings there's been discussion regarding FEMA assistance. We're going to get it. It's not there yet. When I talked to the public assistance folks in the state of Kansas, they said it could be after the first of the year before we're even allowed to start putting our data into the system. We're prepared to do that, but we don't, we're just kind of sitting idle right now until we have that opportunity to move forward. There was a conversation that the county administrator had contacted me in regards, and I think it was a miscommunications with the city of Lenexa for a $20,000 bill. The previous public works director and myself, we asked all these entities to keep track of their cost. Mutual aid should not cost anything, but if we choose or they choose to say, hey, we're demanding to have our funds back, we should rightfully pay them back. They're not asking for that. That was the documentation that they had turned in. I know that Public Works staff has pushed that through, and right now the city of Lenexa is holding that check. They were confused when they got that as well. So they're not going to expend that to this point. But the other cities, they've prepared other documentation as well for us, and we will be able to use that as volunteer services for these communities to meet our 15% match with the federal government's grant. It's a 75-25 split. Federal government pays us 75% back. 15% of that comes from the local, and 10% of that comes from the state of Kansas. With that said, right now we're looking with the documentation that we have in place between $900 to $1.2 million worth of public damage. Will that all be claimed? I don't know that for a fact, but that's what we're looking at as far as cost is concerned, and that's for public entities. And this includes the Missouri River, this includes the Kansas River, Stranger Creek, as well as the May 28th tornado. The Missouri River was out of its banks. It just went back into its banks, I believe it was last week. It's been at flood since March 13th. We still have people, residents that are out of their homes up there off of Hildenbrandt side of it, and it does not look like that the Corps of Army Engineers is going to make those repairs anytime soon. They're doing it on a priority basis, priority based on population in cities far up north, and they said it could be well into the middle of next year before we start seeing any repairs being done on the levees that we have in our area.
Is it possible, there's obviously quite a few levees that there's no, even if they had the funding or the intent, there's no way, given the water levels, they'd be able to repair
that is correct.
In time for 2019?
And that's where I was leading to Commissioner Shimpke, is that we could still see, and they prepared us, they as in being the Corps of Army Engineers, prepared us that we could be seeing catastrophic flooding again into 2020 because all the reservoirs in the mainstream are plumb full, and they continue to get full. We've already got snow that's falling down there, which is earlier than has been expected, and we're not out of our heavy precipitation, realm within here, but up north as well. So County Administrator asked that I come before the board and kind of talk about what went right, what went wrong of the May 28th tornado. And if I was to put a grade on it, and that's probably not fair to say, I'd say that we responded with a good, strong A within that process. It was, but anytime you have a major event like that, you learn from it. And what I provided the board is the after action review. It's in draft form because we still have things that we add to that. But we had 4 different meetings that we conducted. Those meetings were provided to the fire and law enforcement folks. Then we broke it out. I had an after action review with the Public Works, the mutual aid folks, as well as our own. And then we had one with the law enforcement group, and then I had one as a total county. And we took notes of that, of what went wrong and what went right. And we have a tendency, or I have a tendency, to beat myself up when it comes to what did we do wrong, and that's what's spelled out. In the after-action review, it's also a corrective action that we'll place into our emergency operations plan. And I think one of the biggest things is that what it came down to is the roles and responsibilities that we have. Everybody understands what they're supposed to do on a day-to-day basis, but when it comes down to disaster, I think that I failed on that part. That break out when I talk about ESF, their emergency support functions, to describe what those individuals were. So it was suggested that we come up with checklist, and I felt that was pretty important, and that's already been incorporated into the emergency operations plan. What I plan to do after the first year, the first quarter, is that I'll start meeting with those emergency support function groups, and starting through 1 through 15, each one of them has a specific. ESF 1, for an example, is transportation, so that's going to be council on aging in the school districts and things of this nature. To sit down with them, let them understand what their role and responsibility is during a disaster, and then we'll have small, like tabletop exercises. And I plan to do that all the way through. At the very end of that process, I'll bring all these ESF partners together. We'll have a large tabletop exercise to work through what we've been working through on that year-long basis. And I plan to do that in the third quarter. Another portion of that was the discussion when I asked for public works assistance. We developed a task force, and I made that with 2 phone calls to my emergency managers in the state here, and it was overwhelming to see that I had 7 task force, which indicated that we had out of a task force. There was skid loaders, there was front end loaders, there was the dump trucks, there was personnel to use saws, and a supervisor. And there was, like I say, 7 of those folks, plus what we had here in the city. Caused some congestion in the city of Tonganoxie. I apologize. I had no idea. I asked for 3 and ended up with 7 plus our own people. So it was suggested that we look at another site, and then it was the fairgrounds. So with that said, we had developed what we call logistics staging area. Logistics staging area is actually at the Leavenworth Fairgrounds, and if we have another disaster like that, that's where people will be directed to go to and assign their tasks and missions to alleviate that area. If it doesn't work there, we have the option to move it to the Kansas Speedway, so we're out away from the area, depending on where the disaster's at, or the Field of Dreams up in just north of Baser. So we have various areas that we have, and that's been incorporated into our emergency operations plan. A lot of good came out of it, but like I said, I want to kind of touch base on those areas that we had the responsibility here on the county side. And with that, there was the lack of the incident command system. And when you're working with a diverse group, we had law enforcement, we had fire, we had public works, and when that all comes together, the unified basis of that was somewhat confusing. And my role as an emergency manager is to make sure that the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, is up and running. Actually, that was up and running within 30 minutes after the event. Our IT folks did an outstanding job to get it up and going, and we had it fully staffed within 45 minutes. I know there was some confusion with the county administrator. He said, "Do you want me to come up yet?" And our whole deal was situational awareness. So that tells me that we have to have better situational awareness of what's going on. When I first was told, it's like, hey, we were hit by a tornado. This is from the incident commander that was in Linwood area. He said, I think it's about 10, 15 houses, is what we're looking at. And yeah, that's bad, but I had no idea that it was going to be to that extent. And communications went well, but we have some tweaking that we need to do with our communication system. We have an excellent communication system in the county, but we have to determine, in an event of a disaster, we have to come up with common frequencies. We've talked about it, we've never done that. I'll be getting with the communication supervisor. We'll come up with a communication unit leader to sit down and come up with a document that can be shared with everybody as we're going through the process. So incident command, when I was talking about incident command, they actually have redone the entire incident command system this past year. And so it's kind of a transition year. They have not been offering a lot of the higher level incident command structure. Right after the first year, that's all going to be released. And there's a new one that came out that's for emergency management and the incident commander in the field. It's an interface course, and that's the one the state's really going to be looking at. The other one, Commissioner Culberson, is our GIS. And I don't want to say that it failed, but it was confusion there. We had Public Works folks that are familiar with GIS was providing us maps. And that was for the initial onset of the disaster. Where that came to play and was confusing is that if anybody came into the Emergency Operations Center, the situational awareness that you were looking at really didn't make a whole lot of sense, except for those that are actually in there and been working with the mapping process. We had sat down with the GIS folks at that time and tried to have them develop a map that was going to be beneficial to us, and there was still some confusion of what product did we actually have. And I know I talked to Commissioner Culberson, and I know it's not your place, but he said, hey, call me and I'll come in. And should I have done that? You know, maybe not, but we made it through it.
Well, I think, Chuck, what I was going to add to that was I've been talking with Jeff. I thought he was still in here. And we're going to work up a better SOP. I realized after this happened that my SOP that I had in place when I left was pretty vague. And I realized it was because it was designed for 2 employees that we've had for 10, 12 years that have been through a couple tornadoes and a couple floods. Wayne and Leslie knew pretty much what to do because they helped me go through the last couple emergencies. They're both gone. Tyler's the only one left, and he's been here less than a year. So my SOP should have been a lot more detailed. The biggest problem with writing an SOP is when an emergency actually happens and you can't plan for everything and you've got lots of different people walking in the door. The biggest problem was he didn't realize that he should have been here at the courthouse waiting for you guys to walk in the door when he saw a tornado in the news, because your first responders need the maps to get out there first to organize, you know, their search and rescue. So I think a more detailed SOP, I'm working with Jeff to get that done for you.
And I plan on doing that. Jeff was, he's not here now, but that wasn't intentional to leave Jeff out as the transitional process of GIS going under the planning and zoning folks. It didn't click with me. So what that told me is that I need to have a checklist myself. And again, that's been developed and it's been placed into the emergency operations plan. So when there's an event, I can hand out those checklists, and I can hand one out to the county administrator, I can hand one out to Public Works, and they know what their task and their role is, including myself when it comes through. So that was a shortfall on my particular part when that was going through.
Yeah, we'll get it fixed.
I'm sorry?
We'll get it fixed.
Yeah. I think the county's overall response was great. We utilized a number of resources across the metropolitan area that we were able to use to our benefit. As commissioners may or may not know, I sit on the incident management team of Kansas, and I did ask for an incident management team, but with 70 counties, basically that was unavailable. The biggest team was set up in Fort Riley waiting for Tuttle Creek to discharge, and that never happened, praise the Lord. But we have to look at what we can do for ourselves. So that tells me that we need to be able to train folks within our own county to do that position, or the metropolitan area, which we have that capability. But again, with it being so widespread of so much disastering going on, I couldn't call on my Wyandotte County folks because they were affected. I couldn't call on my Johnson County folks because they were affected. So it's something that says, well, we got to fix that internally and train our people up to at least a certain level that they'd be able to function if that happens.
Chuck, if memory serves, didn't we see a city or a few cities perform beyond what was expected, and other cities within Leavenworth County provide little to no response? Am I correct in that recollection or not? Because I'm assuming all were contacted.
Yeah, all the cities were contacted, but what you got to understand, Commissioner Shemke, is they were dealing with limited staff, but they had issues they had to take care of in their own communities. As it turned out, every city helped us in the debris process. They had to take care of their shop first, if you will.
No, I understand that. I'm not trying to necessarily call anyone out. I just wonder, as a part of this, if when we think about those checklists or what our expectations are, is there something that we can communicate on behalf of the county and say, in an event where your resources are available, I realize that if you're dealing with the same challenge, you're going to focus internally first. But I thought that was really surprising to hear how some came to aid immediately and others, there was some question about that. And I hope it was just confusion or lack of understanding, or
yeah, I think it was a lack of understanding. And
maybe we can help with setting expectations, I wonder.
Going through their process. What was positive about it is that every community assisted within Leavenworth County. And that was overwhelming to see that outpour. And they were there for, I don't want to say day one, because like I say, they take care of their own stuff. But as part of when I was talking about the emergency support functions, when we get, and Public Works is emergency support function 4, when we sit down with those folks, we'll have the city folks and the county folks in the same room and be talking about, what's expected and how's this going to work through that process.
Awesome. So
we've planned to get through that. The other one I was going to talk quickly about was the 211. 211 is United Waste 211, and we set that up for folks to receive help and folks to provide help. And it became confusing for the fact that with Douglas County being so close to Leavenworth County, 211 is a call center, if you will. We provide them the details, and that all comes out of Wichita. So these folks weren't familiar with our area and the geographic area of it, so they were actually sending our volunteers to Douglas County, when people would call for help and we weren't getting them here. And it wasn't until about day 3 we realized that was going on. So we made the determination that we wanted to set up what they call multi-area coordination. We were going to set that actually up in Eudora area, because that way it brings the Public Works, the VOEDs, the volunteers organizations from Douglas County and the ones from Leavenworth County together and saying, hey, we need to start singing off the same sheet of music. So we did that on day 3, and that seemed to start working things out a lot easier there. That first weekend we had, it was Saturday, we had 1,200 volunteers, and Sunday mirrored that again right after that. So it corrected itself more or less, but it wasn't until, like say, day 3 that we realized we had an issue when we weren't getting any volunteers that were coming through that process. The other thing was Alert Sense. We could have used Alert Sense more to that's our new mass notification system, to our advantage. We failed to use that, and I think it's because, one, we had so many things going on that didn't dawn on us, but we need to look at that as being a tool. I can put, when I say the emergency operations staff, we can put them on a speed dial, if you will. I can put it in there so Mark is in there, that David's in there, that planning and zoning, Public Works, that with one message I can say, hey, we're activating the emergency operations center. We need you to respond to X, Y, Z. And then we can have one that the county administrator can use to notify the Board of County Commissioners. So we've already worked on that. That's already been developed into our mass notification list, and we just broke it down. It was a group that was an oversight, but the other portion of that is that we're still working on it, is to get all the employees of Leavenworth County into that system. And that way we can have that, we can do a poll. Have you been affected by the recent disaster, yes or no? And then we have a good idea of how many folks have actually been involved in that disaster process. So we're still working on that. We got to come up with a process that. The other thing I'm going to leave with, then open for discussion, is that I feel that each one of the agencies within Leavenworth County need to have what they call the government emergency telephone system cards. Not everybody has access to what we call FirstNet. FirstNet is the first responder, if you will, telephone system through AT&T. With government, the GETS card, if we was to provide this to the county councilor, it would give him priority phone call during a disaster. We had a lot of people saying, hey, we can't get out. The same way with the commissioners. I mean, I was sitting there with, I believe it was Representative or Senator Watkins, I can't remember. And he was using your phone through the sheriff, because the sheriff could only get out. And,
he couldn't get in.
Yeah, exactly.
He was on the opposite side of the
Exactly.
where we were.
So we were trying to coordinate that, but it was all because of phone breakdowns and communications and everything else that I saw that the need to have, to get gas cards. We used to have them a long time ago, but they weren't utilized. This is, again, gives priority to not only wireless, but the hardline phones at the same time. So it's putting code in and going forward. So I kind of touched on the highlights there. I'm sure you folks have questions. I'm more willing to answer.
You guys did an incredible job.
They
did. That's just.
We have good staff.
Yes.
We have good
Top
staff.
How do you keep
bottom.
the public out from taking selfies?
I'm sorry, yeah.
How do you keep the public from plugging the roads up and stopping and taking selfies?
Major Shirley had a good comment, and I have it listed in there.
Can we say it in public?
Sure. He just basically said that, journalism needs to have the integrity when they're interviewing people, because we found that, and John, don't take it as wrong, but media was trying to grab everybody and anybody to get the information. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Major.
No, you're fine.
But
You still have 50,000 bottles of water, trying to figure out what's.
yeah, how that worked is that we had and I guess that was another shortfall, was that the Sherman Township's fire station in Linwood became a community point, which is okay, but it taxed their volunteers, and we tried to put other volunteers into that place. If I had to do it all over again, we probably would use the Linwood Community Center for that gathering point. The school district allowed us to put the water. We ended up having 8 pallets total of water that was stacked 5-6 foot high, and they said we can't take any more water. Heart to Heart International took all of our donated items back. They put it on the shelf. This is if Leavenworth County needs water. If they need any of these other items, they're here. Send them out as they need them for other disasters, but they know that we have in the bank, if you will, 5 pallets of water. So that's how that comes out.
Very cool.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump into your.
And there was no injuries transported in Leavenworth County ambulances? Is that still true?
There may have been one.
Just one?
Wasn't there a heart attack or something?
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe there was 3 injuries. One was transported. Those were all within the immediate startup of the event. We had one individual that was later during cleanup trapped against a house by a tree that he had cut himself.
Good.
The takeaway from it is you can't have an F4 tornado and walk away from it with as few injuries as we have. It just it flies in the face of logic.
Amazing.
At the same time, to answer Commissioner Shimke's question from earlier in regards to resources, I don't know if you were talking specifically about fire, public services, or law enforcement. We had contact from, I would say, without a doubt, every law enforcement agency surrounding the county and within the county, and some of the response that we had from either Lansing PD, Leavenworth PD, was to augment our forces on the north end to allow us to move people to the south end, because our basic marching order from the beginning, as we got help from Tongi, Baser, Bonner, the Highway Patrol, and our forces, we probably had 20 to 25 officers in the field almost immediately, so much so that you almost couldn't get them all logged in as they went in service, but they all immediately went to different traffic static enforcement spots. And we set up the command center at the annex trying to log where those individuals were to address the question you had about the flow of traffic, getting people moving back and forth. One of the things that we have addressed, whenever you have an incident like this, one of the things that is always very apparent is that it's a training exercise in real life. You learn so much from an incident like this. We're very lucky that we had an incident of this magnitude with as little injury as we had. We had significant property damage, but on the backside of it, our skill level is going to be that much higher as we address any other situation that comes up. You'll see where you might have a deficiency in the flow of information between law enforcement agencies or the flow of information between communications and fire, and I believe we plugged those gaps very nicely, and a big portion of that was the after-action reports where we went back and forth between the different entities within the county and outside of the county to assure that those questions, where we were not shored up, we've now shored up those holes. And across the board, like I say, the law enforcement perspective of this, once it had taken place, our marching order was to keep swimming. We wanted a high visibility within that sector. When you had the Tonganoxie tornado years ago, was it 2000? You had a city that you basically had to circle the wagons around. This was an 18-mile swath that was 3 miles wide, and Chuck's got some dramatic figures about the scale and the scope of that. We had some drone footage of the incident that really will, it's impressive and awe-inspiring as to what a storm like this can do, but that was what we were up against. That's what we had to get to, and you had utility companies from all over the metro, you had road work crews from all over the metro, so we had to make a determination on where we could let traffic flow as best it could, where they couldn't get traffic through, and we had to close it off on both ends. And those were ad hoc groups of law enforcement officers that we were able to deploy throughout the course of the day. Just about everybody that we had was on a 12-hour shift, rotating in and out. And like I said, our major thrust was to try and get increased and high visibility in the south end of the county.
I don't think we had any looting. And then one report.
We had one incident of a chainsaw that was stolen. We had a few cars that were rifled through in the south end of the county. I believe some tools taken out of one car, some hand tools. But by and large, we, like I said, the one thing that we could do was continue to have a high level of visibility. Our goal was, and people made the comment off and on throughout the time that we were down there, how many of you guys are there, because you seem to be everywhere. That was our guys and gals being out there moving and continuing to move, interacting with people. Some of the cases of water where people couldn't get in and out back and forth because they were so busily working on their residences, our guys and gals would put pallets or flats of water into their car and pass it out to people and try and have person contacts if they had a specific need that they thought, hey, we're going to be away from the house, we won't have anyone here, will you check on it? We were trying to come back and address those needs as well as we could, but you had so many ruptured structures throughout the south end of the county that it was very difficult. So in the end, the fact that there was that little looting is kind of amazing.
It is amazing, and I'm listening to the more advanced warning system testing going on right now, and I think that ironic. No, I'm just saying that I think that people are now that are less apt to ignore. Well, that's the test. It's always on this time on this day. That they're more likely to listen and pay attention and to prepare themselves than in the past, and that we do have that ability that helps to reduce the number of injuries.
And the apps on your phone.
Yeah, the apps on your phones, but that we have those, the Sheriff's Department has that thing where they will warn you.
We continue to have people call and ask in reference to the Alert Sense, and our Alert Sense skills at that time we were really just kind of getting rolling and seeing how we were going to utilize it. We've had several situations in the south end of the county where maybe we had a individual crash a car and we were looking for them in the woods, and we were able to utilize alert sense. We've got some tips from that where we were actually able to apprehend those people as a result of some tips. So it's been a boon to us.
All of that stuff is really cool. It's a
And
tribute to our.
again, in working in concert with either fire or especially outside entities from other counties, when we had people going door to door, checking on people, triaging residences, so to speak. One of the takeaways was the ability to mark those residences on the fly as we check them, so that we have those items in the car. We can mark a residence to where we're not duplicating efforts over and over again, and we're able to concentrate on areas of need rather than just one after another. We're going to the same residence. So,
Commissioners, like I said, there's always room for improvement, and I've been involved in many disasters across the state of Kansas and other places throughout the nation, and I felt that we had our act together. We were able to respond and deal with people. We still have some unmet needs that are taking place, from the Missouri River, and I know that some individuals have reached out to Commissioner Stephen, and we've had communications in regards to some individuals, and we've tried to get them help, and I think we have succeeded in doing that. I know that there's still 2 structures left that they haven't done any demolition, and I know that that's an insurance factor, but at this point, I still don't think the county needs to get involved until it becomes a health hazard, if you will. If it becomes a health hazard, then we would have to.
Well, I think we go way beyond what we should do. When you allow people to take equipment and push houses out in the road and we clean it up, I think that
yeah, there was a couple of those that happened, and
people cutting trees in the back 40 and dragging them out to the road and having the county pick them up. That shouldn't happen.
Yeah, and that I want to say that's common.
It is. I've seen it. I've worked a lot of these, Chuck, and I've watched it happen, and we've had people drag farm machinery out to the road, and we had to haul it off. So.
Well, but by and large, the best in everyone was brought out in the situation, and it was incredible. It was an incredible response, and the fact that there was a lack of people taking advantage of this disaster. But through the looting and things like that. I'm saying through, going through people's private possessions and stealing their things, that was so minimal.
For the most part.
For the most part. I said, I think that it's just, we live in a great county, and we have great responders, and we have great law enforcement and staff and citizens, and I think it's.
This was a big deal. I mean,
it was, and it was amazing.
It was a big deal.
And
there's no doubt.
I think the outcome, however, I feel my heart breaks for the people who lost their homes, but
absolutely,
overall the outcome was amazing.
Chuck,
when you look at the big picture.
You mentioned at the beginning the cost of $900,000 to $1.2 million versus the $26 million in.
$26 million was the residential.
Total assessed.
Yeah, that was the residential. The 900 to 1.2 million is what the county.
Direct to the county. So when we started with 70 or so events across the state of Kansas, and I don't know year to year whether that's a high number or low number.
That's highest it's ever been.
It would seem like it, and I hope that that's not a sign of what's to come. Again, nobody has their crystal ball, but are we likely to see more and more events given more of these 100-year floods and the fact that we've got already failed levees and reservoirs that are already full. So knowing there's so many more events and we can't even apply for some of this funding until 2020, it doesn't sound like there's much risk in being able to get that funding, albeit the more and more events. Back in my mind, I'm always like, there's only so much money. So with more events, is there a higher risk of not getting funding? And if we can start applying in 2021, January, are we still 12, 18, 24 months out before receiving those funds?
It's broke into categories, Commissioner, and the category A and B, which is the immediate response. Usually you're going to see that funding again, 6, 7 months, after. But the long term, if we had to, redo the roads and things of this nature in various areas, those are the ones that take longer to get your funding, because there's a lot of research that FEMA folks want to do, the engineers and things of that nature, that before they release those funds. But with the state being the keeper of the coffers, if you will, funding is becoming in pretty rapidly for these communities. Where it was normal being 16, 18 months has been a lot faster, because you don't have what they call the appeal process, that you have to sit there and beg, borrow, and choose from various agencies to get your point across. If you got the documentation in place, they're going to sit there and they're going to write you a check. I think the state of Kansas, they said this would have been 2018. Out of all the disasters that happened in 2018, they had one appeal. And that's pretty incredible, because they had quite a few in 2018.
So out of even the 70, do we know, let's say I'll just round it to $1 million worth of, claims or costs that we incurred, do we know where would we rank? I mean, how do they rank that?
They don't rank it.
They don't.
It's, you get your information in, it's reviewed, and if it's approved, you get your check.
Okay, so we don't know if that was one of the most expensive events.
Oh, that I'm sorry, that I can't answer, because I don't know where we're at in that pecking order. But as far as standing in line to get that funding, that's not the case.
And I had a question, a pigtail kind of on Chad's comment. Where are we at on the landfill, the Tongi Quarry?
Landfill? Actually, I talked to the state when I was talking to them. Actually, we can remove that. I just talked to them on Monday. We can remove that, because we were waiting for FEMA to come through, so we can go ahead and get a contract written out. I know I provided the county councilor with some sample documents for contracting, but we just weren't ready to move that yet. We just wanted to make sure that FEMA had a chance to make sure they got all the pictures, and I'll make sure we have additional pictures for the most recent days, make sure nothing else has grown, and then we'd probably go ahead and get that out on contract, and I'll work with the county administrator and county councilor to get that going. Speaking of that, the rationale on the debris management plan is to have temporary sites. The temporary site for Linwood was actually the Hams Quarry, which is right next to the city of Linwood. It sold the day before the tornado, so it doesn't belong to Hams, and so we couldn't utilize that. My alternate site is the Linwood's got a little, it's about an 8-9 acre tract where the lagoons areas are. We were going to use that, but it was so covered with debris we couldn't get back to that. So the next choice was to bring it up to the quarry and utilize that. So
it literally sold the day before.
It sold the day before. What's the chances of that?
Man, I don't even
It's in such close proximity.
Yeah.
It would have been almost.
Are you have any concerns about the Kaw River over the winter and next spring?
Commissioner, I'm concerned about all of our waterways.
Well, I mean, I knew, they were going to start opening up and going to.
Yeah, they are evacuating.
Have a major flood.
Major water out of Tuttle Creek still and Perry, but it all is based off of what the Missouri River is doing. And Waverly, Missouri is the key point, believe it or not, for the Kansas rivers to evacuate into the Missouri River. Because if Waverly's at flood, they got to hold back. So they've been holding back this entire time till the Missouri River drops. As soon as they open up, it's going to bring the Kansas River back up. So as far as flooding, I can't make a prediction on that, but we watch both the Kansas and the Missouri River on a daily basis of what it's doing.
So we still could deal with the Kaw River the next year or so.
Yes, we could.
Don't want to do that.
I have a couple questions for you. On the debris plan, I know one of the issues was, like the next day, was we didn't have dumpsters located down there. And is that in your plan now been updated that will occur?
Yeah, and Commissioner, that was one of those things, I had 100 million things going through my mind, and even Public Works, we had 9 of them sitting up there at the transfer station. It would have been real easy to just yank one of them, because we went out to look, and there wasn't a dumpster to be found out there with the contractors. And
people were screaming.
Yeah. So now we're aware of that. It's addressed, and I think I had it in my after-action review as well, that dumpsters come from the transfer station first to start alleviating that issue.
And when there's a disaster going forward, where do you anticipate you physically being? Will you be at what location will you be, or will you be out on the road, or what? Where do you?
It's wherever my coordination has to take place. Most of it's going to start right here, within the building, and then Kim should be able to take that over, which she does. That's my deputy, and take over that, and then communicating with her on a regular basis, with the units in the field, on a regular basis as far as the briefings and things of that nature, not physically doing anything. Of course, whatever it takes to work through that recovery process. But most of my time will be spent, here throughout the.
Well, I know one issue was the fire chief down in Sherman Township was visiting with me about, at some points not being able to get a hold of you during the time.
Yeah, and he got a hold of me. He was trying to get me to go down there. I tried that on several bases, but I got tied up in doing other things. On the very onset, I guarantee you, my place is here. And we were here till, gosh, what time did you go home? I know it was late.
It's probably 1 o'clock.
Yeah, easily. I think it was about 2 o'clock before I left here.
And as far as the overall ability to get a hold of anybody in the first probably 6 hours till midnight, we did have FirstNet in place. We were not Band 14 compatible at the time. We got with our provider, and they actually got us into phones at zero cost to get us into that Band 14 capability, which probably would have bolstered our ability to have those fire personnel get a hold of either Mr. McGaha, myself, Sheriff Dedeke. I know one of the first phone calls I got, probably 15 minutes after, from lacing up my boots and running out the door and getting to 32 Highway and 182nd, was Sheriff McGovern from Douglas County, despite the fact that he himself had been involved in tornado activity in his county, offering assistance. And then it just continued as you could get phone contact. You were getting contact from chiefs of police, other sheriffs, Johnson County Sheriff as well. But at one point we had so many people offering to come in, you just about couldn't have put them everywhere you needed to put them. Secondarily, I think we've addressed issues where we could share that information back and forth and have secondary points of contact to allow, if someone from the fire side needs traffic at one location during a high volume of radio traffic, they'd be able to go to this source and get that sent out through a secondary channel to allow. There was a point where it was just, even with throttled down radio capabilities, as far as people trying to stay off the radio and not have that much traffic, you're going to have an incredible volume of traffic because you've got 9 times more first responders out and available at that time than you do at any other time.
I know one of the issues that he visited with me about was whether in the future there could be some kind of a very large drill that would even involve the commissioners, like maybe not be involved, but seeing it and witnessing it, as far as having all the players that were involved together in a drill, and then everybody give their feedback. Well, this didn't work last time, and this is the changes we've made for the next time. Is that something we did?
That's what my process is.
That's what he was discussing
is to
earlier.
work through.
Okay.
And then we'll have one large, we'll start off with a tabletop exercise, because when you start getting into functional and full-scale exercise, that's hard to do because of funding and things of that nature.
And those tabletop exercises are always more effective when you're able to put your real-life experiences back into them
Right.
and overlay it to it. It's all well and good to hear about something that happened in Houston, Texas, or wherever it is, but if you're able to say, when we had this in Leavenworth County, this is what happened at this intersection because of the way it's designed, we couldn't get flow of traffic, in the coming days, we're discussing trash service being backed up, but at the same time, U.S. mail service was backed up. You had people trying to deliver Amazon packages down roadways that you couldn't get people down. It's, life continues to go on. Life continues to go on, but to some degree, I mean,
we had people that was doing that.
yeah, something as simple as Meals on Wheels was, I'm sure, radically affected at that point.
Well, I know the folks down at down there at the Sherman Township, they have a lot of things they still believe they'd like to communicate to the county folks, and hopefully there'll be some further method that, I know they've communicated, you've already met with them several times, but there's more things they feel like that we need to hammer out for the next time this happens, and I'm sure it's going to happen.
That's every event.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest with you, Commissioner Stevens, in my experience in working several of these disasters,
Everyone's a little
better off the county commissioners stay out of it and let the people who know what they're doing do it.
Well, I'm not saying us be involved, but maybe us just listening in.
Okay. I'm just saying.
This is going to sound kind of strange, but we're kind of fortunate that we've had about 7 tornadoes since Chuck's been here in the last 25, 30 years, and a dozen floods. So we're actually kind of fortunate that we've got that much experience with tornadoes and floods.
And Chuck is amazing in putting together the events for people to emergency preparedness, and for having the tabletop exercises and arranging for the responses. I mean, we are lucky to have
I think
this man as
because of so many experiences we've had, I think is why Chuck's on this.
Well, and I have heard nothing good about the overall response, but don't take it wrong when I'm relaying this.
We know we got to tweak it.
Yeah, but overall, like, this wasn't like a Katrina. This was a successful dealing with a major catastrophe, and
like I said,
please don't misconstrue what I said.
Hardly any ambulance rides for an F4. Like I said in the beginning, I can't believe hardly any ambulance rides for an F4.
Sometimes in that regard, better lucky than good.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mr. Culbertson, over the years, I have heard from other counties and municipalities in the state that our emergency preparedness department is one of the best. I hear that about very few other county departments. I can think of one other example. But I would observe that it seems most of these natural disasters started occurring.
When I started with the county, I think it was called the Civil Defense Department.
Yes. Yeah, now that you mention that.
Well, this was incredibly helpful. I know I was one of the ones early on that said, hey, I'd love to better understand the good, the bad, the ugly, regardless of how fantastic we did. There's always lessons learned, and I don't think any of us would disagree. It's an A effort. All the feedback we got was it was an A effort. Incredible work done by all of your team, staff. Humbling, really, and I know we've had a lot of dialogue about it, but the fact that we're willing to look inward and find ways to continue to improve and get better, and know that we have tools that maybe we can now leverage better than before because we didn't know all the capabilities of them, or had maybe just started to use them like the Alert Sense and some of these others. But I'm convinced more than ever that this is going to be more frequent rather than less frequent. And the flooding for sure. There's no question we're going to be, I think, challenged beyond what even maybe you've experienced over the last couple of decades. Unfortunately, we're just set up that way.
Yep.
And if you haven't been up to South Dakota or further, taken the drive and experienced and seen house after house after farm after farm after silo after silo, they've already seen records there. They're starting so far behind that I think the writing's on the wall, unfortunately. So thank God we have all you guys and your experience to leverage. But anything we have learned, did learn, can apply, I hope we don't have to use it, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
Not every county has 2 rivers that run through it.
No kidding.
Will that 211 system be tweaked for the next time too, or have they?
211's kind of out of our control. I have expressed my concern to the leadership, and they were going to look into it. But I think when it comes to play, that we're the citizens not familiar with the geographic area. You know, 211 would say, hey, you know, we're looking at helping in the Douglas County tornado. Well, they didn't realize it was the Leavenworth County tornado, so they would face it there. So we have that we were looking at. We have some folks that would call in that they have Eudora addresses down in south end of the county. So they would send them to Douglas County for their check-in point, and it wasn't that at all. We have folks that have Bonner Springs addresses that it didn't even fall into play. And you know, when you're looking at an organization that is outside of our geographic area, it's kind of hard to wrap your arms around that. Like I say, once we figured out what was going on, it wasn't until day 3 that, like I say, I did talk to the leadership, and they're coming up with some more questions to ask when folks like myself call in, you know, to kind of give us a geographic area or a mapping area so they can have something physical to look at.
What time are you guys going to be there?
Noon.
Oh, noon? Okay, we got plenty of time.
We need to get ourselves ready.
Oh, I know. Well, you're ready.
She's got to get stuff ready. Come on.
All right, I just had one question. You know, this board had been talking and had some work sessions on private roads. And going through your plan, we don't go on private roads for doing any assistance or anything like that. So does anybody have any thoughts on that?
One less thing to worry about.
Okay.
Whatever the board wants to direct us to do, we'll include that if that's something that you want to have be included. But I know we have situations down in the Tanglewood area that or Timber Lakes, I should say. Of course, we've got Bear Lake, and we've got some other roads out around Lansing that are private roads. That,
well, the 143rd Park by Field of Dreams, that's private.
Yeah. So these are areas that
you'd love that, or you would hope that a resident's safety is priority 1 first and foremost, no matter private road or otherwise. I know we have to be obviously very careful and cautious in knowing that also opens up risk for the county if someone wants to come back on us for any damages, personal or otherwise. But
something we can do, and the public works director at the time wasn't, you know, he was construed to doing what the plan said, but we could have a caveat that in the event of a disaster, we get hold harmless agreements. David could write something like that up, that in the event of a declared disaster for your particular area, we can come in and we can do the debris, or we can, whatever might happen to transport. We need to be very careful when we look at that.
And I think we had talked about that, and there was a lot of support, because we're all getting phone calls, and they're like, we'll sign a petition, we'll sign whatever you want us to say, you know, we're not going to hold you responsible for any damages or anything else. And I think when and where, and I don't even know if that could be a part of, you know, planning and zoning. If you think about it, if you have a development project and it's going to be a private road, that's a part of the process of going in a disaster. Realize that we're coming in to save people, and if something gets broken, I have to see it. It is what it is.
I think there's a difference in response. We obviously respond to
What
threat of life.
Understood.
It was the debris cleanup that we don't go on to, because we clean the public right-of-ways, and they wouldn't have any public right-of-ways in those neighborhoods. That was the difference. But we absolutely respond.
But if you talk about anything across, you know, that's preventing traffic going in or out, emergency or otherwise, it's got to be addressed.
Yeah, and that would be addressed. Of course, we had, Commissioner Smith probably remembers this, when we took the private road and did something to plow the road out.
Oh, EMS situation,
get EMS
they had
in
a
there.
quarter-mile-long driveway and saved
They made
a
a claim
person's
against
life
the
and they
county.
sued us? No, I don't remember that.
Okay. So we need
They can sign it before
to
they
be
get
careful,
it.
you know, even under a response.
Thought they should pin a medal on us and they pinned the summons on us.
But that's something we definitely can look at to work through the process if that's something the board wishes to look at.
Well, I mean, rather to deal with it before than instead of after.
Right.
Sure. Sure.
You can't even make this stuff up.
No, no, you can't.
I know one issue that came up was when the collection of debris was going to end. And some people felt like the notice was, they didn't get the notice. Do we have any kind of going forward, at least think about how we can change the notification process or make it broader, or, that seemed to be an issue.
Maybe we can just get an electronic signboard that's portable that you can just take down there and it
And
scrolls
debris
across.
collection
And it
ends.
scrolls across, right, yeah, debris collection ends on this day. I mean,
But are
people
you
just,
talking
it's,
about debris in
that's
the
really
right
not
of way
our-
or the debris people were dragging
yeah,
to the road?
that's not our responsibility
Well, that's-
technically, so.
Well, I mean.
Personal responsibility goes a long ways here.
I agree with you, but I will just gently push back a little bit. I think the fact that we collected a little more than we should have actually
Set the
helped
precedence.
it helped the process and it helped the citizens to be able to return their life back to normal.
And I agree, but I'm just saying, but,
So-
in somewhat seriousness, just something that's there on the road that kind of tells people now you've got one more day,
Yeah, I mean,
Clean it up.
that is a possibility, which,
Our social media was
I thought it
horrendous.
was
I mean, it was fantastic we were looking at getting 30, 40, 50,000 hits on something. So that was one way. The other way, we could have literally gone out and hand delivered, and I know county administrator had discussed that the timeline, and that was listed in here, that we date stuff saying that, hey, on XYZ, we're going to be ending this, and kind of working through that process. I mean,
We
it's
should have
really,
an alert sense too.
yeah, alert sense, we could have used alert sense, and just geocoded that particular area.
We do have a message board.
And said, hey, we're going to be giving that out. So there's a lot of tools that we have that we'll be utilizing in the future.
How long did we use county resources to pick up debris after the tornado date about? I'm sure it's probably.
I know I talked to Mark, and I told him June 9th was going to be our cutoff point. I figured we can be done. We went to June 11th.
And the tornado was
May
May
28th.
28th.
Now, I know that they went back through and did sweeps
Some
here
other
and there.
Yeah, there was some other stuff beyond that, but I remember it being like 2 weeks,
But
right?
the actual
About 2 weeks.
12, 14-hour days ended on the 11th of June. And
Yeah.
now,
But I think they were still cleaning up right-of-ways of trees that was
Yeah.
in the right-of-way that blew
that's-
over.
Couple
Our
weeks.
crew.
We did have some follow-up response
Right.
down there after the tornado was well over.
Because the power company went through there and then they had to clean up that mess.
But you guys did a great job.
Absolutely.
thank you.
Very well done.
I hope we don't have to do this
Me
again
either.
for a while.
Well, I think as the tabletop exercises continue, you'll hear reports of those and how they're
Yep.
going and
Yep.
what the results are. But I think that's the next step, and I think Chuck has a really good grasp on that.
think we
Sometimes
take
it's hard
over
to
slides.
receive feedback without getting your feelings hurt. And I don't
Right.
think Chuck had any problem with that. I think you received the feedback, has implemented it, and you have a good report.
Yes, we do.
So are
Thank
you,
you.
after the first year, you're going to hold an incident command training? Or,
Actually, that training, they're talking about sending me to Utah
Uh-huh.
for the week-long train the trainer.
And then you
I'll
come
be
back
able
and
to
do the
come back
training?
Great.
and be able to do that. That's still in the works, but that'll be the first, it's the only place they're doing train the trainer for that particular course. But there's other classes that's coming out. It's called the ICS 402 for elected and appointed officials, which is about a 4-hour course that I want to bring into the community here. Again, it's 4 hours of commitment to elected officials and appointed officials. I think it's well received.
I did the
I
incident
agree.
command training under John Duncanson. That's how long it's
John
been.
Duncanson,
Yes, sir.
1999.
Huh?
1999.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, that was right after I got the trainer.
Oh, okay. Well, it was
Pretty intense.
yeah, it was like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, it was a 4-day course.
And then you had to take your test.
I got the Tillman Nestor crash course.
Okay. Well, like I said, when I started
When is
here.
that? A 402?
I believe it was.
It's called the Incident Command 402,
When is that?
and I haven't set it up yet.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be after the first year.
Okay.
Any other questions for anybody? I know some people are in a hurry to go.
Go get wet?
Get ready.
What are you gonna do
Yeah,
that?
well, I have one thing before I go to
Okay.
it. Just because I just want to let the fellow commissioners know that I was asked to serve on the Emergency Food and
that's
Shelter
right.
Program and Assistance Advisory Board, and that's for the,
Here in Seeger, Missouri.
it kind of provides emergency assistance to local charities, which will be, the Catholic Charities has been asked to do it. They're applying for the grant funding, and they have to have certain people on the board reviewing the grant application, approving it, and all that stuff. So I agreed to do it, and the meeting is tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'm just letting you guys know that I was contacted, asked to do it. I said I would do it, so we have a meeting tomorrow, and it's just mostly just to say that they have filled the slots in the grant application
Okay.
for having someone there.
Thank you for doing
Yeah, thanks.
that. Yeah.
So I just wanted you to know that that's,
I'm sure you were just looking for something else to do.
Yeah, if there's any extra grant money, Vicki, there's tons of
well,
people we know
yeah,
want it.
I think
so-
they're getting around, I think Leavenworth County's getting around $12,000, so that would be
Okay.
for, no, it's one of the things that they
Check.
use for people that are about
You're
ready
gonna
to be
let us know
evicted.
when you set that
And they can go in and get some
402
help,
Oh, okay.
you know, with
Yes.
that, or, you know, some of it's with the food bank, the food pantry and stuff, part of the food, so people can go in and shop. But the big thing that they do is try to prevent evictions.
Okay.
And it's just people with, you know, and that are eligible from being evicted.
So there's cash assistance?
Yes, it's cash,
Okay.
but, you know, it's paid to the
Well, but I
landlord,
mean,
but
it's
it's
still
cash
considered cash
assistance, yes.
assistance. Okay.
So,
All right. Anything else? Commissioners have anything they've done in the last week? Other than several of us went to the comp plan
yeah.
meeting.
The poker run.
Oh, yes, and went to the industrial park deal at Tonganoxie. I got there kind of late. I wasn't there for the whole thing, so.
I got to see all the sites. We went, did you?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Did they have 30 or 40? I was
They didn't
trying to
have
go.
that.
And congratulations to all the newly elected,
All the sites.
Oh, yeah.
all of our newly
All
elected
the
officials
newly,
for the cities
elected
and
people last
Oh, yeah.
night
School
won their
boards.
elections.
Probably had 60.
And thank you
or
for your
so.
service to those
They
that
had a
might
good
not have been
turnout.
reelected.
And the food was
Right.
great.
Well, we have
Any barbecue
canvass.
episode.
Right, I said who might not, didn't, I said where might not,
Because there
but,
is some close elections out there.
yep.
Oh, speaking of that, I'd like to congratulate the mayor-elect in Tonganoxie, David Freeze, and City Council, Mr. Jake Dale, and Ms. Baldock getting elected.
On the school
Tonganoxie.
board.
Yep.
All right, and I had just Baser School Board was Jeanette Clam, I believe. I think that was it. I can't remember. What the other Yeah, it was an incumbent, right. Okay, then a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
Voting.
Aye.
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 Nice.